Our speaker has been, I first discovered Alex at Product Camp. He was somebody that has been a speaker at Product Camp in the past, and he was just so nice and knowledgeable, and he's been a multiple speaker here. And I'll tell you a real quick bio on him. Alex McCarthy has worked in product management, software development, marketing, and sales roles in companies ranging from early-stage startups to global publicly traded companies. He has built successful product management and marketing teams for embedded hardware, enterprise software, and web application solutions. Recently founded Navigate Next, dedicated to helping leaders make smarter transitions faster and navigate to careers where they are passionate and engaged. That's exactly what we are all looking for, is it not? His topic today is going to be mastering the job interview. I give you Alex McCarthy.
What I thought we would do is, the first mistake is, my name's not John Doe. I set that up as a template and didn't change it when I was working on the presentation, so forgive me. It really is Alex McCarthy. So what I wanted to do, actually do this. So what I wanted to do was just talk about interviews and how to master or ace, depending upon which version of the presentation you're looking at, and just why that's so important. And I'd like to take a little bit of a different, what I think is a different tack on interviews. And I think the really big thing is the mindset that you have going into an interview. So we'll talk about the mindset, and then we're going to talk about preparing and why preparation is so critical to putting your best foot forward. And then we'll talk a little bit about how to make the best use of your interview time, because it's very limited, so you want to make sure that you're just maximizing the impression you can make on the interviewees or the interviewers. And then we're going to tackle two types of questions. One is a behavioral question, and hopefully everybody has a pen and paper because there's an exercise. And then we're going to talk about estimation questions, which our lady did a great job of calling that out, which is how many golf balls will fit in this conference room. I have some other examples. And then we're just going to have a quick conversation around common questions, because sometimes if you do all this work and you're prepared and you're ready to go and they ask you a really simple question that you hadn't really thought of and you stumble on that. So we want to make sure that we don't stumble on the softballs. And then we'll wrap up. So that's what we're going to do today. How many people hire a grocery store? How many people hire a grocery store? Okay, 2, 3, okay, 4. So the rest of you guys don't eat? Not skipping a meal. So the concept, when you walk into the grocery store, you've hired the grocery store, right? And you're on equal terms, you've got some money in your wallet, and they've got a bunch of food. So what problem is a grocery store solving for you? Supply. Yep, what else?
Convenience.
Absolutely, convenience. What else? Service. What was the back? Price, yep. So that's the perspective that when you go into a job interview that you should have. They're hiring you to solve a problem. And the sooner that you can figure out what the problem they're solving is, the better off you'll be. So a lot of times the mindset is they have the job and I need one, and that makes them more important or have more power, however you want to phrase that. And what I want you to do is to say, no, it's not like that. It's more equal. Yeah, they have the job. Yeah, you need a job. That's true. But in terms of the transaction, really think of it as two businesses that are joining. They're partnering up for a certain period of time. The idea of lifelong employment's long gone. So the job is really a long-term consulting contract. How many people here have been involved with consulting or like software agreements? Okay, so a couple. So typically with those, you say, this is what we're going to do, this is kind of how long, this is what the service level agreement is, we'll respond in this amount of time. And the job is very similar. Typically it comes in the form of an offer letter and then a whole bunch of detailed HR documents. But really it is this kind of joining of two businesses. And you view yourself as the CEO of You, Inc. And it has to be a win from the outset, otherwise it won't last long. So try and find out what's fair. You don't want to take advantage of them, or you don't want them taking advantage of you. Let me back up. So what's the purpose of the interviews? Purpose of the interview. Why do you want to go to an interview, and why do they want to have you come into an interview? To evaluate each other, absolutely. What else?
Learn more about each other.
Exactly, learn more about each other. What else? What else?
See if you're a good fit.
Yeah, good fit. Exactly. And to start negotiations as well. So fundamentally, all those things come down to really two things. You want to build trust, and you want to build comfort, right? So trust is, can you do the job? Will you act with integrity? Will you be authentic? Will you be a good culture fit? And comfort is, just what's your appearance, your demeanor? Are you going to fit in with the culture? Are you confident, especially in a role that's going to be maybe customer facing or have a lot of interfacing with the company? You want to be confident but not overconfident and arrogant. So that's the two things. So once again, when you go into the interviews, think about the ways that you can build trust and comfort with them, and then also think about how are they building trust and comfort with you. Right? Once again, it's this peers coming together. So it's a different mindset than I think most people have going into interviews. And if you go with this mindset, what you'll find is you'll be a lot more comfortable and a lot more confident when you're sitting in the interviews. And a lot of the nerves and stuff will go away. You still have butterflies, but they won't be as strong because people think differently around that. So that's really, really important. So if nothing else today, please start thinking about really it is, two businesses partnering up for a certain period of time under a certain set of conditions that need to be a win-win based on trust and comfort working with one another. All right? Okay. So now we're going to go into preparation. Preparation is absolutely key. If you think about it, looking for a job is like knocking on doors. Going down a neighborhood, knocking on doors. And you're going to knock on doors, and at some point one of those doors will say, yes, come on in, welcome, and that's finding a job. So you only have so much time standing at the front door talking with them for them to decide if they want to welcome you in, and you decide if you actually want to step in. So you have to make the most of that. And the way you make the most of that is being prepared. Spend time researching the company, their competitors, their industry, more than just looking at their website a half hour before you go in for the interview. People can pick up on that. The other thing, once again, the typical mindset of an interview is, they're going to ask me 20 questions and I might get a question at the end. Well, if you view it as two businesses that are having a conversation to see if there's a good fit, well, the conversation ought to be a conversation and not an interrogation. And so, ask them some questions up front. They're going to ask you a question. Kathy says, why do you think you're good for the job? Or do you know, Java? And I'm going to say, hey, that's great. I'll get to that in 1 second. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions about the job and the role, just to make sure that I'm doing the best job of answering your questions? I don't want to go down through my resume because they've already read that. I don't want to waste 10 minutes saying I work at this company, and this company, and this company did this. That's a waste of time at that point. You just want to find out what's their challenge. We hire grocery stores. They're hiring us. What are they hiring us to do? You want to have a short U pitch, right? U Inc. So typically, I had a client yesterday who's going into a really big interview this afternoon. So for those of you who pray, please pray for him. And he's like, well, what do I say? And I'm like, well, what do you have on your LinkedIn profile and that little summary thing, right? If it's, not the long first thing, but that little short thing at the top. I say, just say that. That's all you want to do, and then you want to move on, bridge to asking questions. We'll talk about story examples here. Those are great for, you tell a story to give a very specific example. If you look at the job description, typically there's like, requirements, and then there's responsibilities or something. For each one of the major bullets or one of the major points in the requirements, try and come up with a specific example that talks to that And if you do it in advance as part of the preparation, then when they ask you a question, because you know the question's coming around those bullets, you don't know which one or what the order is, then you've already got a very clear and concise little story that you can tell. You'll be prepared, once again, in confidence, because you've got the answers. It's just a matter of picking which one when they ask the question. And then finally, develop a list of questions you want to ask them. Even if you hold some of those off to the end, you definitely want to have a list of questions. One of the questions you want to have early on with them is, what challenges are you having? What does success look like? And that's all about, once again, trying to find out your business, you're solving a problem. What's their problem? All right? Does that make sense? Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Is there a point at which employers will think that your asking questions is eating up too much time? I ask a lot of questions. It's fine.
Yeah, so there's a balance, right? There has to be an information exchange. And fundamentally, especially if it's like a phone screen or the first interview, you want to do a lot of selling, which means you'll be doing probably more talking than asking questions. 70-30, right? 80-20 maybe. But the key thing is up front to ask a couple of questions to really figure out what the hell you should say, what you should say the rest of the time, right? That's the key. You'll read a job description. How many people here have written job descriptions? Beautiful. How many of those job descriptions 100% accurately said what the role was at that point in time? Yeah. 3 or 0? Yeah. Right? Okay, good. He's the man. So, what's your name?
Doug.
Doug. So whenever the rest of us are writing job descriptions, we send them to Doug. Doug will take care of them. You've copied the last job description, you have 20 things, you really only need 4. So if you're going into an interview and you're going to try and answer all 10 things, let's say, they're only going to care about 2 or 3. What challenges are you facing? Figure out which 2 or 3 are the most important. Hey, which of these things are you really, really critical versus must have versus nice to have? And that way you kind of start the question, let them get an answer. Once you understand the answer, then you know which examples to pull out, where to spend your time in terms of answering their questions. All right, so you've got such an advantage. So please ask that question up front. And then practice, practice, practice. So the fact that you all are here, right, is a really great way of getting a chance to practice. Get a phone number from one of your friends or whatever, email, and just get on the phone and practice each way. I'm looking for a marketing job. This is the rec that I'm looking at. Here's a set of questions I'd like you to ask me so I can practice answering them and get feedback, and then obviously turn it around. So practice, practice, practice. Your kids, wife, aunts, uncles, in-laws. Your in-laws will really appreciate it because they want you to get a job. So that's always good. So we talked about the problem and the job description not being the same. So you want to have some hypotheses. Right, so you want to walk in with some ideas of, this is what I think the problems are, because you've done all this research and you've read the job description. Maybe you've spoken to some people who work there or used to work there. And so you've got to have a set of hypotheses, or assumptions would be maybe another word, that you want to test. You don't want to assume, because assume is ask, you, me. That's never a win. But just think about in the back of your head coming in, what do you want to test? And that may be some of the questions that you have. And I already talked about asking the questions earlier. So then the interview structure. How do you want to spend your time? Most interviews, they say it's an hour. In reality, it's probably like 40 minutes, 45 minutes, because by the time they get settled in, they're running late from their meeting, they got to go to the next meeting, hand off, you got to show up, whatever. So just plan on basically, 40 minutes to 45 minutes. Plus, you want to make sure that you've got some time at the end, if nothing else, to ask some questions. So pleasantries, very important to build rapport and start building that comfort, this trust and comfort. So that's building comfort. If you're nervous, that's fine. They expect you to be nervous. That's all right to be nervous. And then this is where the 2-minute summary comes in about you. So they'll say, oh, yeah, so tell me about yourself. It's not starting back what you did coming out of high school all the way up through the last job you had. It's that short statement. If you don't have one, they're not that hard to write. You can Google personal pitches or something like that. and you'll come up with it. It literally, you think about the news, right? In 2 minutes, they can cover earthquakes, wars, weather, sports. Maybe not sports, that takes longer in Texas. Right? But 2 minutes, they can do a lot. So in 2 minutes, you ought to be able to explain kind of the core of why you're there. Ask them about the challenges is next. Once again, this is maybe 5 minutes, maybe 7 minutes. So now you're about 15 minutes into it. And then you want to go into sell mode. So then they're going to ask you questions, and then you're going to use your appropriate examples to give them very short, powerful answers to their questions. I guess all the people who wrote job descriptions probably also then turned around and did the interviewing. How many people have experienced you get the high-level process answer? Right? Oh, have you done this before? Yes. I would go off and I would, talk to the engineers, and then I would, after talking to the engineers, I'd go talk to some customers. After I talked to the customers, I'd come back and talk to leadership and get them bought into the project that we want to launch. No duh, right? Versus using a SOAR, which we'll talk about in a second, it'll be a little vignette, and you'll know exactly what you've done and why you've done it. And then ask them some questions, and then before you leave the room, ask what's the next step. Either with the hiring manager or with HR, you want to know what the next step is and when, because you want to follow up. Right? So the next day, you're going to write all your thank you notes. You want to make sure you've got the contact info, but you want to know before you leave the room, and at the end of the day, what's the next step and who, what, and when. So now we're going to move into behavioral questions. So this is the first of the two types of questions. There are other questions. I only had an hour, so I picked the two that I think are the most important. There are instruction questions. There's another one. There are just fact-checking questions. Do you know how to do X? Do you know how to do Y? But these are the two that I think provide the best value when an interviewer asks them, and therefore you should be prepared, because even if the interviewer doesn't ask you for a behavioral question, you still want to use one of your SOARs to answer. Because once again, as you'll see, they're very short and very powerful, so it's very compact and you're not wasting a lot of time. Describe a technical problem you had, and how did you solve it? Tell me about a time when you showed initiative. Give me an example when you solved, and you can literally take a couple of bullets off of the job description. You don't know which ones, but you know they're going to ask you those. So just be prepared that they're going to say, oh, give me a time when you wrote the requirements for a new product launch of, a global SaaS product. Okay, so off you go. Or at least if you haven't done all of it, then come up with something that's close. The reason behavioral questions are so important is because unlike the stock market, past performance of humans is very indicative of future performance of humans. So if they've seen you stumble, if they have seen you stumble in the past in a certain area, or you have a certain behavior, something gets in the way, you just stop and you wait for someone to tell you what to do, so lack of initiative, then they're going to know, or it's highly probable that you'll do the same thing when you come work for them. Okay? Behavioral questions. So, how do we answer them? You want to tell a story. So, how many people here have studied storytelling or are good storytellers? Okay, 4. For the rest of you and me, the rest of us, it'd be worth it to get some storytelling training. In training, I mean, it could be YouTube videos, it could be slides, but there's an art and a science to telling a story, and you want to get good at it, because that's what's going to make the difference between having a huge impact in your interviews and a mediocre impact in your interviews. So, be specific. None of this high level, I'm going to do this, and I would talk to engineering. Paint a picture, right, with vivid details, especially when you're talking about the situation, what the situation was. You can paint a really horrible story so that your result looks great. Highlight what you did versus the team. And this can be kind of hard because I think a lot of us prefer not to, we think we're bragging or we're tooting our own horn, so we say we a lot. This is one of those scenarios where you need to say I. As part of the team, I did this. As part of the team, I did this thing, right? So I went and talked to the customers, ran the survey, analyzed the results, and brought back to the team, the data, right, or something like that. So you got to make the distinction about what you did and what the team did. And then you want to do it in a chronological procession. It's kind of like telling a joke. Right? The joke has to go a certain way. Oh, I forgot something, right? Well, you just killed the joke. So it's the same thing in the story. You want to tell the story in a certain order, and that's why writing it down and practicing it is so critical. All right, so this is what a SOAR framework looks like. The first thing you want to say is you want to talk about what the situation was. Then you want to talk about what the obstacle was. Then you want to talk about what you did, right? My actions. And then you want to talk about what the result is. Has anyone seen this before? Sometimes it's SAR, sometimes it's STAR. Okay, a couple people. Yeah, okay, great. So use it. How many people are using something like this? Good. All right. So we're going to have an exercise. So the people who just raise their hands, other people you want to pair up with them, okay? Because they're already experts. So I'm going to give you an example of what this looks like. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get out our pads and pens and go through an exercise together. So, and this is one of my personal ones that I used. I figured I'd just use it as an example. So the situation was we had an opportunity to increase our sales in the optoelectronic market. The optoelectronic market was an adjacent market to the products that we had, and so it was a chance to use our same products and sell it to a new market to get new revenue. The challenges that we had is that we had very limited market knowledge. We really didn't know a lot about the context, how it was used. We didn't really understand what the customers wanted, how they spoke, what their priorities were. And then also we had a lack of consensus internally. Some people thought, yes, we should go do this. And some people said, oh, no, we're too busy in our main markets to spend any time doing this other thing. You're going to be a distraction. And so there was this really, at some points contentious difference of opinion inside the company. So what did I do? So I went out and met with a lot of customers. I met with our channel partners, which were a big part of providing solutions to our customers. So I spent a lot of time in the field, went to trade shows. And I was I tried to be as quantitative as possible. And so when I came back, I had a set of quantitative data from talking to customers and asking them the same set of questions, basically. And then I had a lot of anecdotes. And so I put those two things together, and then I met with development individually, got them on board. Then I met with marketing, got them on board. Then I met with sales and got them on board because they saw the dollar signs. Development understood that they weren't going to have to do that much different. It was some very minor tweaks to software to make it work. Marketing loved it because they had leads and they wanted to get more leads in that space. And sales loved it because it was selling the same products which they knew to new customers. So it's a real easy learning curve for them. So the result was we launched this derivative product in 3 months, and we did $20 million in sales in the first year. So if you had asked me the question, give me an example when you went out and entered a new market, or you went out and did something to increase sales, or you went out and tried to understand what your customers want to do, which are kind of different questions, right? One's about sales, one's about understanding your customer, maybe product management, and one's more development oriented. What do we got to do to solve the problem? So all these different questions, you can use the same example. That's why you don't need to have 100 of them. You just need to have a handful, half a dozen, a dozen, and then just recognize which one you want to use based on the question coming in. So what do you all think about the SOAR? Is it pretty good? You think I would make a bigger impact by having answered that rather than, having increased sales? Well, I went out and studied the market, and we found some products that we could sell to new customers, and it worked out great. Right? Huge difference. Don't be the second guy. All right, so what I want to do is I want to take 15 minutes. I want everyone by themselves to take 5 minutes to think of your job, your target job. Think of one of the requirements that you see very frequently across the different job descriptions. All right, so it's something that you're going to get asked in these interviews. And write a SOAR. And on the next page, I've got No, that's just, I'm sorry. It's the next example. So I want you to write a SOAR. So 5 minutes to do that. You're just basically going in and thinking about your experience, writing that down. And then in 5 minutes, I'm going to ask you to pair up. And this is where those people who raise their hands are really important. You want to try so you're going to pair up, and then 5 minutes, A gives B, A says to B, and B gives feedback, and then you flip it around. B says what their SOAR is, and A gives feedback. So is that okay? Anyone have questions about the exercise? Yes. Yes. You got it. So, any questions? Okay. Can everybody find a pair real quick so we can get that done before we? Yeah. Great.
Yes. Would you like to be here?
Yeah. Very thoughtful. Okay. Then let's start the 5 minutes now. It's 14 after, so 19 after we'll start switching.
Is there anybody that doesn't have a buddy?
Let's call that a wrap. All right, so I'm looking for a volunteer who can tell me their SOAR. A volunteer to tell me their SOAR. So it kind of works like this: either a volunteer or voluntold. So who wants to volunteer before I voluntold? All right, thank you. So if you'll use this. What?
10 seconds to look at my outline.
Yes.
Okay. Hi, my name is Pat Inman, and I work as a project manager for foundations and businesses, and as a freelance editor, which is really managing smaller projects or projects with a smaller group.
Awesome.
So the University of McCarthy at Chapel Hill had a situation in, I think it was the fall of 2006. The state legislature, in their wisdom, passed an immigration law, which we had to comply with. And we had 5 months to comply with it. And it's a very large feudal organization, which is to say every department does its own thing. And the person on whose desk this problem had landed, and I'm not sure exactly who it was. I worked with them, but the fact that I'm not sure tells you something about the organization. But we were having meetings to solve it, and I had been hired to document their processes. So we want you in there documenting this. Well, so the problem was no one wanted to own the problem. There was no internal subject matter expert, and there was a tight deadline, and initial research showed that the problem of noncompliance could be very expensive. So what did I do? I took the little bit of bite of this that they'd given me, and I researched what was going on next, and I was established within about a month as the guy that took the notes and the guy that sent out the memos saying what we do next. The second thing I did was I met with the different stakeholders and listened. And part of those stakeholders were people who wanted to do something but needed specifications in a certain way, or wanted to be sure that these people didn't do something else. And so I'm tracking all that. And I provided relief because somebody was doing something, and then people had leverage to get something done. My notes became a manual that they followed to comply with the new immigration rules, which were actually federal rules that we were adopting ahead of other people. And we met the deadline. We had a special tool that the Ag Department built to do it. We had job descriptions, got people hired to do it. And there were problems with the United Problem, but we solved them. We did not have a major compliance problem. I stayed working on this for 2 years. We iterated it twice, and we got to the point where they could justify, and I helped write a contract to get someone to provide a tool that would do this a lot better. And HR centralized an order process in a feudal organization, and everybody was glad to get rid of it. And so that's what I did.
Great. So, what do you guys think? It was pretty good. You went through the SOAR. He had some good details in there. He had lots of results. He had the immediate result. And then he had the follow-on sustainable results for the next 2 years that he worked here. So for those people who are hiring managers, if you ask them the question, can you give me an example when you had to build consensus on a project and drive it to conclusion, say that was the question you asked, what do you think about the answer? Pretty good? Convincing? Right? Okay. Great. Yeah, well done. Very, very well done. All right, so let's go estimation questions. So our friend who, so I think you're an inspiration on lots of fronts. Just so you know, I was outside listening to what you were saying, and my wife's a stay-at-home, mom. We have 4 daughters who are still at home in middle school and in high school, and we've been fortunate that we've been able to do that. But moms are amazing, and they are completely an untapped resource. And it's the old saying, if you want to get something done, give it to somebody who's busy. Right? That describes mom. So hats off to you for taking that leap of faith and the courage and putting yourself out there. Like you said, you just started putting it out, and one thing led to another. And congratulations on your new gig. I hope you have many, many years of happy work. So good for you. So she came up. She was asked. It's a great example. I'm like, yes. Right? You are going to get asked these questions because people want to know how you think and how you deal with ambiguity. Right? Can you take something that's not super well defined and come up with an estimate of what that is based on a certain set of assumptions? And so, to your point, golf balls, how many golf balls will fit in this conference room is a fantastic example. How many bottles are produced in the world each year? How much would you charge to wash all the windows in Seattle? Right, that's really ambiguous and tough. And then how many square feet of pizza are eaten every day in the U.S.? Right, so the key points here, once again, is to make sure that you think about, and you should practice some, right? So take these, we're going to do one as individually, but just get some other ones off the internet. You can borrow our friends, right? And just think about how you would break that down and get used to this thing of state your assumptions, because there's no right answer when you're asked an estimation question. There's just a better answer, and the better answer is, I'm assuming these things. I'm assuming a golf ball is about 1.5 inches in diameter. I'm assuming that this room is 40 by 50, and I'm going to assume those corners are actually a square. I'm going to assume it's 20 feet high. And 20 feet high, kind of in the middle, and that'll balance out the fact there's a slope. Right? So you're talking out all your assumptions. And so once you've stated all your assumptions, then you can go into, okay, now how am I going to do the math on it, right? What's my formula for doing that? So I say, okay, I go to the whiteboard, or I whip out my iPhone and start doing the math. Okay, so it's height times width times length. That gives me cubic feet. I say how many golf balls are in cubic feet, and I calculate that out, and I come up with a number. Right? That's what they want to see. They don't care, if you got 10,251 or 100,000. They just want to know that you can think through an ambiguous problem. By doing that, you've demonstrated that. Is that kind of close to what you did? Did they grade you on the answer and give you a?
No, and I even stopped and asked them. I said, okay, refresh my memory, the volume calculation for, and like I didn't even think about it. I said, okay, calculating volume on a golf ball, that is blah blah blah. And so we discussed, okay, well, even the guys between the two of them, it's 4/3 pi r cubed. And then I was like, oh wait, am I even able to ask that? They're like, yeah, of course you did, yeah.
And you can ask clarifying questions like that. Now, if you're an engineer, they probably would expect you to know something like that, but.
Oh, they said they didn't work on that stuff.
Yeah, see, and that's it. Bingo, that's it. They don't really care about that. You could have assumed it was a cube and 1 inch on a side just to make the math easy, and they're going to go, great. I just want to know what your assumptions are and how you're doing the math. And then then you can do optimization, right, which is a step beyond that. So if I use, which is what I was going to do, I was going to assume the golf ball is a square, 1 inch on a cube, 1 inch on a side. Then I can come back and say, okay, well, in reality, we know it's not. it's the ball, but all the balls don't sit together 100%, so there's air in there, so that's going to limit the number of ball or whatever, and then I would, start doing some stuff around that to show how you can then optimize your first estimate.
Sorry, so you give the initial estimate based on your simplifying assumptions, and then you go back and revise according to, like, or removing the simplifying assumptions?
Some of them, yes, right. And then you can stop at the estimate and say, is that what you were looking for? And if they say, well, we want you to take away this assumption, then okay, then you go back and you optimize it based on that. Okay? So I was going to do square feet of pizza. Fantastic example, so I did that instead. But people will ask you this. People ask you this. Bill Gates was famous for asking how many manhole covers are there in the U.S. And then you would also ask, why are they round instead of square or rectangle? So just stuff like that. You got to think through why are they round. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to take 5 minutes, and I want you to pick one of the 3 questions. Well, 2 questions because I did one. Actually, no, you guys can do the square feet because it's there. And then be prepared to discuss. I'm going to pick on 1 or 2 people this time. Once again, volunteer, voluntold, your choice. And then I'm going to ask you to come up and just kind of go through the logic. Oops, I did the wrong thing. Yeah, so I have the slides. You can have the tips and the practice questions. And so the final one, which I thought I was going to do, is how many square feet of pizza are eaten in a day in the U.S.? So is everybody going to pick a question? Does everybody understand the exercise? You have 5 minutes. Come up with an estimate, which is plenty of time, unless you're like really into engineering and calculus. And then I'm going to ask for volunteers or do volunteer. All right? So let's go. All right, show of hands, how many people are not done? Okay, a couple. All right, that's fine. So we'll give it 60 seconds to wrap up.
When you ask these questions, are you given time to think, or are you expected just to start walking through your process immediately?
Yeah, so the question is, when you get asked this, are you expected to answer immediately, or can you think for a second before you start answering? And you can certainly think for a second, right, to get your head kind of around the question. That's perfectly acceptable.
So by a second, do you mean a minute, or do you literally mean just like 10 seconds?
A minute's a long time,
Okay, yes.
right? So you don't want to do a minute.
Okay.
You just want to, 10, 15, 20 seconds.
If they can hear this as you talk to yourself.
But that's my point. That's exactly my point. Because at some point, you're going to come up with a question, and you can ask a clarifying question, right? Oh, did you say golf balls or tennis balls? Right now, that's being silly because you would have heard golf balls.
And if they don't give you paper, then you can say, I'm a visual person and I need to write this down. Can I pull out a piece of paper? And that buys you time to like slow it down and then follow your own process. And how they respond to that tells you a lot about them.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, they're not trying to make it's not in their best interest or your best interest for them to be really difficult and hard about it. So, just, and you can see that's part of the comfort thing, right? If they're not willing to support you through something that's really simple, then they're probably not going to support you through something that's a lot harder, more complex. But you need to find that balance of, you don't want to seem too dependent or too slow. So you can start asking the clarifying questions in addition to, and I'm visual as well, so I will, like, where's the whiteboard? I'm a whiteboard guy. I can't do anything without a whiteboard.
So the other question is, can you ask factual questions? Like, for example, as I was going through this process, I wanted to know how many people lived in industrialized Western democracies or industrialized countries. Can you ask questions like that, or do you just say, They probably don't know that, so maybe let's just take a guess.
Yeah,
Like a
that's,
stab.
that's it. And that's called your assumption. So you would say, I'm assuming that,
Okay.
40% of the world's population lives in industrialized countries. I'm assuming the world's population is 7 billion. I'm
Right.
assuming blah, 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 whatever.
Okay.
Right.
I see.
Okay, so great questions. Volunteers come up, say your name, what you do, and which question you ask and your answer. So your name, what you do, and
I'm Lee Moran. I'm an engineer. I used to be. I'm trying to get into web development. So I play the logic game a lot. So on bottles of shampoo, I figure there's approximately right now 7.5 billion people on planet Earth. So I would say maybe 4 billion use shampoo. Not all of them do, because in the poor countries, people can eat or they could wash their hair. So chances are they're going to use the money for food. So I figured 4 billion would use shampoo, and most people, a bottle of shampoo would last 1 month. So 1 month, so that's 12 bottles a year per person. At 4 billion, there's 48 billion bottles of shampoo a year.
all right, did he answer the question? How many people think that it's even close, like plus or minus 20%?
No. I think it's way, way less.
Right. So that'd be my guess also. But does it matter? That's my point. That's exactly my point. It doesn't matter if you know. The question was, can you ask about the fact? If the person actually knows, it's 23.8%. Great. Doesn't matter. Okay. Who's going to volunteer next?
Who are you going to volunteer there?
Well, I'm hoping somebody will see your experience and go, okay, I'll do it before. Okay. All right. Great.
My sidekick.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Use the same example, but
Of course.
different take.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you didn't copy.
We didn't collaborate. Gary Cernisek, I'm a software product manager, so I do a little bit of this in doing business analysis. But I took a totally different approach. I thought about this approach here that Lee took, but that's kind of indirect. It makes a lot of assumptions. I assumed that all of these bottles of shampoos are produced by publicly traded companies. They all have annual reports. And I assume that you can either directly find out the quantity from the reports, or you can find out the revenue from the different lines of business, come up with an average cost per bottle, and do some derivations to derive the cost.
But
Yeah, see, that's
I gave you the method, but I don't have the answer.
right, and that's why. But I asked you the question. I would say, okay, he didn't answer the question. And what you also want to do is ask them at the end, did I answer your question? Right? Did I give you what you were looking for? And if they're kind, they would say no because you gave us a method, but you didn't give us the answer. How would you get the answer? So I think maybe as an example, do the way that you thought of and our friend thought of, and then come back and say, now the way I would optimize that, given the time, I would go and do blah, 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 whatever else. So then you're getting 2 bangs for the buck, right? Because you're right, that would give you probably a lot more accurate answer, but you have to come up with the answer of what's the number.
Yeah, I would define what I said by saying that as a software product manager, I lead virtual teams of people doing a lot of different things. If I can't give you the answer directly, I know how to go about getting it and getting other people to do it. That's how it is.
So yeah, once again, at the end of the day, they want a number and the logic to get there. Okay. And so what you're demonstrating, right, by not wanting to do that is, okay, maybe he's kind of difficult to work with. I'm not saying it's the case, but I'm going, we asked him a very simple question, and he's, doing this, and you need people to do that. You need people to stand up, so the good side of this, I don't want to put you down, the good side of this is he's saying, no, I don't want to give you a half-baked answer, Give me 10 minutes or 15 minutes, I'll go do the research, and I'll come back with a much better answer. Okay, so, and that's a good trade as well. But just realize in the interview, they ask you for the estimate, give them a number. And then you can optimize. All right.
So, I really like the last thing you just said. I want to make sure I want to implement it correctly. To give the answer and then say, and I would optimize that by going to look at exactly what the current world population is and see how data.
Yeah.
Is that how you would?
Well, I think the optimization is taking a different approach, right? Or adding on to it rather than saying I'm going to go collect better data. It's just say, okay, better way to optimize it is, I'm going to try and segment out travel size from, the big size. So that'll affect, how many bottles there are. I'm making stuff up. Question in the back?
I think we're forgetting a key word in that question, and that is how many bottles of shampoo are produced in the world a year. And so there's a lot of bottles of shampoo that are going to remain on the shelf and are not bought and used. So the calculations that we're using might be widely different from also the SEC documents. I've been in SEC documents. The companies that make shampoo are like Unilever and Procter & Gamble, and they don't get that metadata with their revenues. It wouldn't help you. They don't tell you how exactly.
But once again, so you're optimizing by taking the fact that you're going to have inventory rollover coming into January and going out. But once again, it's not about being accurate. It's about showing logic and coming up with an answer. Right? So the basic answer is 4 billion? 48 billion, right? So great answer. And you can optimize it by what he said, you can optimize it by what you said. So it's not about having a great answer, perfect answer. It's about coming up with a logical, clear answer.
If you're trying to kind of see into their mind to see what they're looking at, like if you think they're looking for a specific answer, then as part of that optimization step, you can qualify your response. You can say, okay, based on this, like in the golf ball example, I said, do you guys care about significant digits? I didn't track significant digits for this, so I'm just, I'm going to tell you 6 million. And so you can do that as a kind of a hedge if you're concerned that you're not giving them the answer.
That's why you always want to ask them, did I give you the answer you were looking for? Right, so there's no questions. They may come back and say, yes, can you give it the 4 significant digits? They can come back and say, can you take inventory turnover at the beginning and end of the year into account? Can you, go out and look at by company as opposed to by population? How many bottles are the top 5 producing and what percentage of the market they have? And all right, so lots of different ways to do that. So common questions. I put two up here. Early in my career, I got asked these 2 questions and I stumbled. So I will never forget these 2 questions. There's a lot of them, but these 2 are near and dear to my heart, or scars. I won't mention companies, but I was excited about the opportunity. The interview went well, and at the end he goes, "So why do you want to work here?" Not good. That's a complete softball. He meant it as a softball, and I completely blew it. And then, what's your greatest weakness? Once again, the first time I heard this was very, very, very early in my career, so that wasn't too bad. And the answer to that is you state whatever it is, and then you talk about how you offset it, right? So my greatest weakness would be I lack empathy. I don't care what you think. My answer is just get over it. So yes, my daughters. So, but the way I work on that is I, practice listening more, and I read body language, and I think about, relationships, blah, blah, whatever else. But I really don't care. Just get over it.
So I struggle a lot with the first question. So if it's, for a company that's like, a nonprofit or doing something that I believe in, but if they're not, I mean, what do they want you to, like, what are they looking for when they ask you that?
A good answer.
Yeah, but what, I don't know what a good answer is if you...
Pick something. You want to help solve, it's all about helping them solve their problems and what their mission is, right? And so don't lie, because everybody will know you're lying, right? But just pick something, why are you there in the first place, right? That's other than you need a job, right? So there's got to be something about that particular company, no matter how small or whatever, of why you're showing up in the lobby. So just use that. I heard the culture is great here. You know, you're one of the top 5 businesses in Austin to work for. I want to help build that. You know,
So you don't have to, so you can say something that's totally unrelated to the business that they are, you know,
you can be unrelated to the mission, but it's got to be related to the company.
okay,
And
so,
it
but.
can't be about you.
Culture, it can be
Right.
a good culture.
Good culture.
Okay.
You got to innovative things, you know, whatever, you want to be part of that. And the thing is, it's not like it's close to my house, or it's right across the street from where I drop my kids at school, or I heard you guys, you know, pay 20% above market, or I'm just, you know, I've got to make rent in 2 months, and I just, you know, it's not about you, right? It's about them. How are you going to help them? Why do you want to work here?
You can turn it back on them and say, well, why wouldn't I want to work?
After you answer the question.
Yeah.
There was a presenter here, I forget who, a few weeks ago, who said, think of your two non-negotiables, that you care about most, and to say, I care about this, y'all care about this. Either way, I would answer.
That's another great idea. That's actually an excellent idea. Once again, just ask yourself why you're in the lobby. And if the only answer that you're in the lobby is because you desperately need a paycheck, that's okay for a short-term move, but I highly, highly encourage you to continue to press on if you can afford it. If you have the runway, try and find something that you're at least mildly attracted to. No, it's, you know, at the end of the day, you know, I've been there. I needed a port in a storm, and I went to work for a place that there was all kinds of red flags. And I said, if I can, you know, it's easier to find a job when you have one, and if I can work at this place for 6 months and add value, right, I'm not just showing up in 8 to 5, that's not my DNA, and add value for 6 months, and I can learn some things, and the people there will say, yep, Alex was only here a short time, but man, he did a bang-up job. And I was right, the red flags. And I was working from 8 o'clock in the morning till 11 o'clock at night. There was an email that went out and said, whoever's leaving at 11 o'clock, please stop using the side door because the CIO gets a text. I'm like, ooh, okay, I'll use the front door, sorry. So, but even with all the red flags, you just got to do the best you can. So these are the last 3 things. It's almost noon. Going back to the very first thing, think about the mindset, right? You're 2 equals negotiating a good business deal, and that'll, not talking arrogance or just confidence. You have a skill set that they need. So once again, it's 2 equal partners. Prepare, practice, practice, practice. Don't do what I did and blow 2 simple questions. That's bad. Behavioral questions. You know by the job description, and if you look at a lot of job descriptions, you can probably pick 6 or 7 things that you just need to have swords for. Start working on them now. Don't wait till the night before like I typically do. Estimation questions. There's a zillion on the web. Just practice them. And then, once again, just you can Google common interview questions and don't get caught off guard. And then that's it.